how do you top one of the highest grossing, most seen movies of all time? You give it a sequel that doesn't do the exact same thing over, but instead continues the story and in a dark, dark way. The Empire Strikes Back is often said to be the best of the Star Wars trilogy, or really any of the Star Wars films, and yeah, they're pretty much right. We open once again with the Empire seeking out the rebels, led again by Darth Vader, as Luke gets a message from a deceased Obi-Wan that he is to seek out Yoda, the Jedi Master that taught him. After being attacked by the Empire, Luke separates from Han and Leia in order to find this Master Jedi and learn the ways of the Force. While learning these new ways, the rest of the gang takes shelter in Cloud City, a place ruled by Lando Calrissian. But little does everybody know that the Empire has an evil trap for all of them, especially for Luke, who Vader has a keen interest in. It's so refreshing that the sequel to one of the highest grossing films of all time is actually doing something a little different. Not just different, but taking chances. The pacing is slower, the imagery is darker. It wasn't telling the story like it was a sequel, it was telling it like it was the second part. In fact, this was the first time on the big screen they actually put episode 5 on there, with Lucas revealing this is now a 6-part movie series. Why start at number 4? Who knows, but people were enjoying it so much, they didn't care. They just figure he could do no wrong. Which, well, we'll get to that later. Everybody likes this movie for different reasons. Well, actually that's not true. They all like it for the same reason. It's darker. There's more drama, it leaves you on a cliffhanger. It's taking this happy-go-lucky adventure that we had with the first one and making it much more gritty. Me personally, I like it because it took the very basic good versus evil story and started to gray it out a little bit. I think most people know the big surprise in this film, but I'm not gonna give it away in case you don't. I will say, when it was revealed, I didn't see it coming, but my mind wasn't quite blown like everyone else. I actually kind of thought to myself, yeah, that sounds about right. That solid line of good versus evil, black versus white was suddenly being blurred, and it was actually very welcoming. As much as we love to say the dark side and the light side, this suddenly made it a little bit more interesting. It didn't always have to be the cowboy with the black hat and the cowboy with the white hat. You could get a little bit more three-dimensional with it. And speaking of which, the movie really does seem more three-dimensional. A lot of it is spending time diving inward. We have a romance blooming with Han and Leia, we have Luke trying to figure out how to use the Force. There's a lot more symbols and foreshadowing in it. It went a direction I think a lot of kids didn't see coming, and hell, even probably a lot of adults didn't see coming. But that's great, because it just got us more invested. The effects once again for the time are still pretty damn incredible. The puppet work on Yoda, even though, yeah, he does look like a Muppet, still feels very much alive. The eyes, the expression, the moving of the wrinkles on his brow. It's the same as watching Kermit the Frog. You know he's not real, but he feels real. He will later be replaced with a CG Yoda in the prequels, and even when he looked the most realistic, you never got the impression he was really there. You got the impression Obi-Wan was looking at nothing. Here, you never feel like Luke's just talking to a guy holding a puppet, you feel like he's talking to Yoda. And it's not just the use of a great practical effect, it's the use of great writing and acting. All of it plays a part. I also love how much more menacing they make the Empire in this. Not that they were not threatening in the original, but good God, Vader just went from this guy who sort of stood in the corner to this monstrous beast. Whenever he comes out with that lightsaber, you feel the intimidation. You feel like you're gonna lose to this guy. This is when he suddenly went from just being a cool bad guy to one of the greatest villains ever. He could lunge at you and rip you apart, but he could also stand perfectly still and destroy you. He can be very patient and intelligent, but he can also be stubborn, killing anyone he just doesn't like. It's a brilliant depiction of someone you love to be afraid of. The movie also goes much more into the philosophy of the Force, but again, not too much. It talks about what it is, but not how it is. It talks about the experience, but not why you're experiencing it. About feeling it, but not touching it. And again, it's not all done in dialogue. There's a great scene where Luke just goes into this area in the swamp and comes across Vader. We know it's not really him, it can't really be him, and yet the fight takes place and he sees his own face inside the mask. Those are the exact right choices that have you say, oh my god, what does that mean? What can it mean? It gives you just the right tools to build your own conclusion. Again, as good storytelling should. So yeah, like everyone else, it's my favorite out of the Star Wars films. Are there still details that don't make sense? Sure, but it's the same as the first one. You overlook it because the rest is just so good. And you know that's not the focus. The focus is to be sucked into this world and its characters. And most of the people who watch it are. It's more intense, more suspenseful, more visual, more philosophical, more dramatic, more of what you've come to love. The force is strong with this one. Did you know that Popeye is technically a Disney film? Yeah, it's one of the few times that Disney actually worked with another studio to get a film made. And I'm here to talk about it today. Why? Because, in my opinion, I think too many people hate on this movie. Okay, it's not great. Okay, it almost destroyed Robin Williams' career. And okay, maybe it is a completely pointless film to have around. But with all those factors taken in, let's just look at the story. Robin Williams is Popeye the Sailor Man. He comes into town just looking to make a living for himself, and he ends up in a giant house with a giant family. One of them being Olive Oyl, played by Shelley Duvall. And if you know the Popeye cartoon, you kinda know the other characters he's gonna come across. There's a character obsessed with hamburgers named Weepy, a cute little baby named Sweet Pea, and a giant bully named Bluto, who always wants Olive Oyl, but Popeye is always there to fight for her. Well, that's all fair and good, but is that enough to make an actual story on it? The answer is, not really. So this story sort of goes all over the place. One minute, it's about him fitting in and getting annoyed with his tax collector. Another minute, it's about him entering a fight and trying to win this big cash prize. Another minute, it's about the baby and how he can predict the future, guessing what's gonna win what race. And another point, it's about him trying to find his long-lost father. And at another point, it's about Bluto wanting to marry Olive Oyl while also looking for buried treasure. It's holy smokes, what isn't going on in this movie? This isn't Popeye the movie, this is Popeye the 5 or 6 cartoons thrown into one. But strangely enough, for all the stuff that is going on in the movie, it has a very laid-back tone. And I think that's sort of what throws people off, but in my opinion, I think is kind of delightful. All the actors, for what they have to do, portray their parts fine. A lot of it is just them living in this town, interacting off each other, and just trying to make a living. And once in a while, I don't mind seeing a movie like that. In fact, I actually would have maybe liked a little bit more if it was more on the town and they didn't have to go looking for treasure and all that stuff. But on the other hand, it is a Popeye movie and you kinda gotta do something similar to that, you know, rock 'em, sock 'em, eat the spinach, all that stuff. There is a lot of slapstick, and granted a lot of it is kind of slow because, well, you're always going to be comparing it to the cartoon, and it's not going to be as fast as the cartoon, because back then technology wasn't good enough to do that, but I think it's okay, because once again, it is so laid back. That's Robert Altman who directed this, and if you know anything about his work, you know that he usually directs very slow, atmospheric movies. And this movie does have a lot of atmosphere. The Popeye cartoons, when you really think about, are kind of quiet cartoons, at least when thinking of the older ones. Yeah, there's the song in the beginning and end, but they're usually very quiet, and a lot of it is sort of lazily dubbed over, but it kinda didn't matter. It just sort of had its own feel to it, and that's kind of what I think of with this movie. It's just kind of its own weird thing. And I think if it was trying too hard to have so much action and adventure and too many jokes, then maybe it couldn't have worked, but I think because it is so slow-paced and it does sort of go at its own rate, it doesn't bother me. At the very least, it's an artist just sort of having fun with his version of something that was fairly popular. And it didn't feel like it was compromise, he was just sort of telling it the way that he saw it. But does that technically make it a good film? Yeah, probably not. Like I said, it is all over the place, it is pointless for existing, and, well, the slapstick can't match with the original animation. But I think for me, there's just sort of this nice environment to it, and it has some nice songs, some actual catchy songs. If you're looking for this great big grand adventure that has a lot of comedy that you're gonna be laughing your ass off to, this definitely isn't the movie, but I don't know, if you're a person who likes to spend some days just sitting back and chatting with some friends and doing nothing much else, this is kinda like the cinematic version of that. You know, with a few goofy moments thrown in, but hey, that happens a lot of laid back conversations too, right? I can't help it, I have a soft spot for this movie. And if you don't like it, I'm not gonna act like I don't understand. I do. A lot of people can find it boring, they can see it as not very funny. But for me, I see it as just kind of a nice film to pop in to relax to. It's got a few funny visuals, some fun performances, some enjoyable songs, and a lot of good atmosphere. Yeah, it's cheesy and corny, but for making Popeye into a movie, what did you expect? I actually think it's a lot better than what they could have had. At least for the time period and what technology would allow. Now you could probably make it all CG with a lot of in-jokes and adult jokes and stuff, but for back then, I don't think this is half bad. From my point of view, it's tough to the finish.
When you're the best of friends, having so much fun together.
The Fox and the Hound is another one of those Disney movies that probably has too many cutesy scenes in it, but to its credit, it uses it much more to its advantage. The film's about a little fox who loses his mother and gets taken up by an old lady. She unfortunately, though, happens to live right next door to a hunter who has a dog. 2 dogs, actually, but one of them's a puppy trying to learn how to hunt. Obviously, you'd think these two wouldn't get along, but they seem to hit it off pretty well. As time goes on, their friendship becomes stronger, despite the fact that everybody's telling them they're gonna be the worst of enemies. But they keep playing and having fun and constantly get into trouble. It's not until the dog is taken away for a long time and becomes a professional hunting dog that he returns and finds that their friendship can't be the way they were. Through an accident, the fox injures the dog's best friend and the dog vows vengeance. And on top of that, the woman finds she just can't hold on to the fox anymore and sets him free in the wild. This, according to every woman I've ever talked to, is a big tearjerker scene. So the two are now enemies out for blood and try to see who will come out on top. It's a good setup for a story and they do it pretty well, but I have to admit I felt like it could be stronger. Like, instead of the best friend getting injured, why didn't he die? I'm sorry, it's just this movie would have been a lot more powerful if that dog died. Or how about when the woman is letting the fox go, just having some instrumental music, or even have it silent instead of playing whatever pop song was popular at the time. Little tidbits like that really keep me from loving this film, but as a Disney film, it's pretty strong. The big scene after the climax is a very good payoff, and you do find yourself very invested in it. And like I said, some of the cutesy scenes drag, but I think it's allowed to drag, sort of in the same way Bambi was allowed to drag. You know you're gonna get to the harder stuff later. I just wish it was a little harder. I don't know, maybe it's the sick bastard in me, but I think this could have been a little bit more adult. But as is, it's a decent movie. The songs aren't really that memorable, and I don't remember too many of the side characters either, but it's the friendship between the two of them that really holds up. I'd say it's definitely worth your time taking a watch. It's the cult hit Tron, and boy do I not want to talk about this movie. Not because it's really bad or anything, but I just hate talking about the plot. Why? 'Cause it's really confusing. And I don't know if that means I'm dumb, or I'm just not a computer programmer, or I just have a hard time paying attention to this kind of stuff, but man is it hard to follow. But I'll give it a shot. Flynn is a programmer who had an idea for a video game, but another person named Dillinger stole the idea and made millions off of it. So Flynn is determined to hack his company and see if he can find anything to prove that he invented the game first. But little does he know he's getting into something much bigger than he can ever imagine. And this is where it gets a little confusing. Flynn is sucked into the world of computers. There's a whole other world going on that apparently we don't know about, and it's all going on inside our machines. Programs are represented by people, digital people. And they have a theory that they're being controlled by other people named users, but that's more of like a religion, which is actually pretty clever. Flynn finds out he has to stay in this world because it'll please the Master Control program, an evil entity that's controlling Dillinger and forcing him to get information on the Pentagon and other government securities. Obviously wanting to take over the world, of course. But Flynn does come across a friend named Tron. Tron is a security program invented by his friend to actually stop this sort of thing from happening, from Dillinger getting too much information, or anyone getting too much information. So it seems like he's the only one that can feasibly stop it. So, did I get that right? I hope I got that right, cause man, it's not easy to transcribe. I'll give the movie credit that the setup for the story is kind of told out of order, and you do have to think in order to follow it, so it's kinda nice that it's not entirely spoon-fed to you. But since the computer age has exploded, we've gotten to know a lot of these terms, and even now it's still kinda hard to follow. Now that's not to say you can't entirely follow it, you just really gotta pay attention. Maybe that's why when the film first came out, it wasn't that big a hit, but I can also see why that would also be how it got an audience over time. because there is a lot of clever commentary, particularly with the religious aspect. The users are apparently controlling the programs, but the programs also have souls of their own, so who's really controlling who? There's a lot of fun stuff that can be had with that, and they do tap on it quite a bit. You can tell the majority of the time spent on this movie is perfecting its look. Which, while we're at it, let's talk about the look, because it is by far the best part of the movie. This film has a design that is all its own. I mean, yes, it's 80s, yes, it's bright neon against black, but at the same time, you look at this and the first thing you think is Tron. There's not really a lot of other movies that have this specific a design. And its use of CG animation was also groundbreaking and never really been done to this extent before. Nowadays, it's pretty dated, but it's still so stylized and looks so good that you kinda don't care. You know it was the 80s, and you know it's just a product of the times, but man, is it such a good-looking product of the times. Some of it looks a little cheap, like the costumes themselves, I don't know, they're supposed to be like neon and glowing, but they kinda look like pajamas half the time. Some set pieces I think were supposed to look like hard metal, but they look more like cardboard. But again, you kinda give it a pass because it's designed so nicely. And it is so unique. And it's shot so well. I love it where even when you enter the human world, you're not entirely sure if you're in the human world. They keep going back and forth, sort of blending the realities, and that's really smart. Again, sort of playing with the idea of who's controlling who. Tron is one of those movies where when you really think about it, it is really smart and it is really clever, but you really gotta take that time to think about it. In terms of just a straightforward action adventure, it can please people, but like I said, you gotta pay close attention to it. And I'm sure there's things that don't add up and are never explained, and real computer programmers would probably look at this and be like, hey, they forgot this or forgot that. But honestly, I think that's just the sci-fi element. That's people making stuff up for entertainment, as well as try to get what other symbolic point they're trying to get across. I think because I'm not a huge computer guy, I can't get into this stuff quite as much, but I do acknowledge it is a good film, and it is very smart, even if it is cheesy here or there, and again, even if the designs are a little dated, but it's still something all its own. It's a good flick, and my guess is there's a lot of people out there that would enjoy it even more than I do. It's just a little too much going on for me to really love, but I liked it, and I'm glad I saw it. But it's proven that it does have a die-hard audience, and you can see why. It has a look that's all its own, it has a story that's all its own, and it is really clever. Yeah, it can be a little cheesy and awkward as well as incredibly dated, but still, when you get down to it, there's only one Tron.